All right, I do believe we are ready to begin. So if you're coming in for this panel, please take a seat and we'll get started. We're so happy to see you here today. Before we get started, I want to recognize our sign language interpreters. And Ian, do we have a light on our sign language interpreters? Please. Thank you. They are Kate Reel. Thank you. And Carrie Patterson will be helping us with sign language interpreting today. Woo! Our second discussion today will focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, goals that Temple has made a lot of progress in. Recent accomplishments for Temple in DEI include hiring the university's first African-American president, Jason Wingard, who took office as the institution's 12th president on July 1st, 2021. Launching the Cecil B. Moore Scholars Program, which creates an academic pathway for Philadelphia public, district, or charter students living in our neighboring North Philadelphia zip codes. Welcoming the largest number ever of Black, Latino, Native American, and Asian students. More than 51% of Temple University's class of 2026 are students of color. That is up 6% from last year and 11% from the year before, representing the largest student of color community in this institution's history. Opening the Digital Equity Center, which will provide North Philadelphia residents with access to technology, help desk support, and provide free education in the areas of digital navigation and digital literacy. Now, on to our amazing panel for today. First, we introduce our moderator, Dr. Valerie Harrison. Dr. Harrison came to Temple University as a member of its in-house legal team and now serves as Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. She provides leadership to the university's central DEI effort and its $1 million anti-racism initiative, which includes establishing a Center for Anti-Racism Research. Just a few days ago, it was announced that Temple was selected for the Higher Education Excellence in Diversity, or HEED Award, the only national honor recognizing U.S. colleges and universities that demonstrate an outstanding commitment to diversity and inclusion across their campus. As an educator and author, Dr. Harrison's research and teaching interests involve issues of race, education, and the law. She is an adjunct professor at Temple University's Beasley School of Law and College of Liberal Arts. She began her professional career in corporate legal practice and served as general counsel at both Arcadia and Lincoln Universities, and as acting president as Lincoln. Dr. Harrison, thank you so much for being our moderator today. Our first panelist to introduce Maxine Williams of Meta in her Chief Diversity Officer role. She is responsible for setting a bold vision and pursuing ambitious DEI goals across the business, which includes people, product, policy, and partnerships. She believes diversity is, quote, a business imperative, full stop. Our next panelist is Erika Irish Brown of Citi. She is Citi's Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer and Global Head of Talent. She's responsible for developing global diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and driving Citi's agenda on talent planning, succession planning, and leadership development. Prior to Citi, she held roles as a diversity leader at Goldman Sachs, Bloomberg, Bank of America, and Lehman Brothers. Welcome, Erika Irish Brown. And Reginald Miller of McDonald's. He is an inclusion champion, Army veteran, and experienced business leader who combines the ability to get things done with the thoughtfulness needed to bring others along. Reggie currently serves as Vice President, Global Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for McDonald's. Reggie has served as Vice President, Global Inclusion and Diversity at VF Corporation, building the company's first inclusion and diversity strategy and turning it into an award-winning program. Welcome, Reggie. Nice to see you. Dr. Harrison, take it away.
All righty. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us today for this wonderful celebration and also for this important conversation. So we'll get started. You know, Maxine, when I started my professional career about 35 years ago, you and I started practicing law. And, you know, DEI wasn't a thing. And clearly, C-suite positions like Chief Diversity Officer, that wasn't a thing. How did we get here and why?
So it's interesting because I think the work was a thing, even if the title was not.
Right, right.
So there have always been people pushing for and working systemically to get more equity, more opportunity. You may have called it different things. Even when I practiced law, most of my clients were unions. So I was working on workers' rights and looking for equity there. And so yes, in the corporate world in America, we now have many more people who have this title, and there are functions that are staffed, etc. I think we got there because people, well, in the most optimistic version of it, it is that people saw the value of the output of having a more diverse workforce, of having more different perspectives at every level in an organization. Certainly, I work for Meta, and we serve people all around the world, right? More than 3 billion. And you can't serve that diverse a population properly if you yourself are not representative, if you don't understand, if you don't have the vision, if you don't have the insight into how such a diverse population would benefit from the products, and the way you build the products matters, the way you serve them. So we understood the value to the business, which is why I say it's a business imperative to have a more diverse workforce. And therefore, you invest in that as you would invest in every other part of business to make sure that you're doing it systematically and that you are doing it intentionally, deliberately, and that you're working towards progress.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Reggie, so help us understand your journey to the thing, to the corporate thing. How did you get there?
Yeah, you know, it's a really interesting journey. And even to piggyback a little bit on the question that Maxine answered, the other piece is companies begin to get sued, and they had to organize themselves around how they were going to showcase that they were making efforts and progress in regards to equal representation and that sort of thing. And so this idea that there's been people for a very long time fighting for it and championing it is one that's important. And I think that's really how my career got started in this as well. I began in supply chain and operations. It's what I did in the U.S. Army and Army Reserves. It's where I got my start for a very small company named Walmart as well. It's in supply chain and operations. But then I bounced around a little bit. Truthfully, and maybe this isn't the best word to use, I called myself a little bit of a mercenary. I went to where the work was interesting. And so I moved from supply chain to talent acquisition. I was an HR business partner. I went back into the business and worked for a few more years. And truthfully, it was when my first child was born, my wife and I, that I made the decision that, you know, I want to impact the world in a way where when he comes through and starts his career, that he could have an equal shot based off his own potential, his own ability. And of course, that only enhanced when my wife and I had the twins. Right. And so it was that for me where I made the pivot. But when I really look back at it, I've been doing the DEI work my entire career.
Excellent, excellent. Erika, share about your journey. How did you get here in this position?
Sure. Well, you know, the funny thing is, I think at a place like Meta, and at the time it was formed, there was a keen awareness of the value of diversity and inclusion. I think when most banks were formed, you know, 200 years ago, there wasn't that same interest or effort around diversity, equity, inclusion. Certainly when I started, you know, a little over 30 years ago working on Wall Street, if you were talking about diversity, you were talking about, you know, securities in a portfolio, you know, and asset classes. You weren't talking about people at the firm. So to your point, it definitely was not a thing. But for those of us who were working on Wall Street, because I spent 15 years as a banker before I moved into the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, you know, the few bankers, traders that were in the business that cared about it, that, you know, felt like they wanted for other individuals of difference to have the opportunities they had, we were the ones doing that work. So I always called what we now call diversity, equity, inclusion my second job, all along the way, being an analyst, being an associate, And then I had the opportunity to join the firm that I first started as an analyst to lead diversity recruiting. So from being a banker to leading diversity recruiting to then realizing, well, you could bring people in, but you have to make sure they're developed and we retain them and we promote them. So I really wanted to be able to influence the entire employee life cycle, which was when I sought my first role to be global head of diversity. Since I've joined Citi leading both diversity and talent, it's also a unique opportunity because you are able to marry the two, your talent strategy and your diversity strategy. And it's enabled me not only to think about the work that we do today, but how we plan for the future and create much greater diversity in the future leadership pipeline of the firm.
Great, Erika. I want to stick with that a little bit. Following the murder of George Floyd in May of 2020, we saw early retirements and resignations because leaders discovered that they were really not adequately equipped to deal with the complexity and the nuance of that moment. And so as an educational institution, we are focused on equipping our students with the skills that employers are looking for in an increasingly diverse marketplace. So what are you looking for?
Sure. We're looking for different things at every level. So certainly for the students of Temple, the first thing I would say is, do well in school, develop your core competencies. You need skills, quantitative and analytical skills, critical thinking skills, things of that nature. Right? So work hard and take attention to detail. Things of that nature really matter when you're junior. So I don't want to have that take away. But also leadership is a skill. And as you grow as a leader, you will be expected to do different things. And what we expect as Citi is that our senior leaders are inclusive leaders. And inclusive leadership is the key. So, and inclusive leadership and manager effectiveness are things that can be measured and should be part of how senior leaders are measured and ultimately evaluated and compensated. So that's something that we really look to. So are you soliciting diverse perspectives? Is it safe for people to create an environment of credible challenge and offer different thoughts, perspectives, approaches? Are you sharing credit for the team's success? Things of that nature. So inclusive leadership to me is the key to making everybody feel like they can belong and contribute and be their authentic selves in the workplace.
Great. Reggie, for you too, what are you looking for?
Yeah, a lot of things echo what Erika said, and because I think it's important. And we launched a mandatory class around inclusive leadership for our senior leaders this year. It's gone amazingly well, and we're going to think about how we cascade that. But I think another thing is important is, the important piece around inclusive leadership is that, diversity can't just be like a thing, right? Like I have my real job and then I do my diversity work, right? This idea that being an inclusive leader is just being a good leader is really essential and core to that. And so when we're looking at leaders who not only think about how they're going to run the business now, but how they're going to run the business in the future, it's really that aspect of how do you really truly take in all those diverse perspectives like she talked about and really equate it into not only how you lead your team, but also how you look at the business, right? The consumer, as we all know, everyone in the room knows, is changing at a very rapid rate. We've probably jumped forward 10 years during the 2 years of the pandemic. The workforce has changed just as much. And so how our leaders now are able to take that, not only lead their teams, but quantify that into, okay, what is the next thing we need to do to be able to have authentic conversations with our workforce and the consumer is a very important part of that. And so we look for a lot of things and it's continuing to evolve. But I think the other part that I'll just quickly add to that is, especially since we're all in global roles, it's not just what does that look like in the US, but then what does it look like whether we're talking about Dubai or France or Hong Kong or Latin America, and then really creating a nuance that really is culturally relevant for that market as well.
That's great. Maxine, so what is your best, thank you for that, Reggie. What is your best advice to us as educators? And what experiences should we be ensuring that our students are having?
Teach them how to question. I work for a company that's focused on innovation. Innovation depends on being able to see things for what they are and to see gaps and to build for those gaps, to see where connections can be made. In the academic space, in the education space, you can go different ways. And on the one hand, there are people who teach to the test. those are not the skills. People who learn through that route are not the ones who have the skills that we're certainly looking for. It's the people who can analyze, who can understand, and then who can leverage. So I'm going to take a little different spin here on the skills around diversity. What is incredibly valuable is to know the worth of your diversity and to leverage that to be the person in the room who may see something others cannot see because of it. And you have to marry that then with the confidence to speak out. And this is why you look at diversity and inclusion. In an inclusive space, you build your confidence to speak out. And now you become that asset in the room. So you may have a lot of people who have the core competencies, and that's table stakes, right? You gotta know what you're talking about. You can't just be coming in with opinions, right? Yeah. You need to understand what you're dealing with. And then, what are you seeing that we're not seeing? So as an educational institution, helping people to build that muscle to be able to push and to question and to see and to look behind, to get to root issues. That is something where if you focused on that, the value of the people who would be coming through this institution would be so great that I think their ability to be anywhere and to become an asset would be incredible.
Okay, I'm going to stay stuck on that because I like that. M. Night Shyamalan just shared with us that he operated within a system that intended to render him powerless, but he found his power. And so to your point, I'd like to give you, Reggie and Erika, an opportunity to build on that. How do we help our young people, our students, to find their power, right? To find their voice in a way that leads to professional success?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge, right? Because it's not easy. None of us had easy paths to where we are right now, right? And so, how do you teach perseverance? How do you teach resiliency? How do you teach even adaptability, right? None of us talked about starting in one place and ending up in that same place. We talked about moving around and having different perspectives. And so when I think about how to prepare students for what's next, I start with that, and I just realized if I put the letters in right, it says PAR, but it wasn't intentional. But when I think about how you really do that in a way that is focused for a student, I remember when I started early in my career, it took me a long time to find out what I was great at.
Yeah.
And then after I found out what I was great at, then I realized, I can do this in multiple places. It's not that just I can only be a supply chain professional or I can only be a talent acquisition professional. What I'm good at goes across a number of different things. And so if I would start with maybe one thing, even though I think I've said several, it's just a little bit of patience with yourself, right? I think it aligns a lot with what Maxine said as well. You gotta have patience with yourself, because once you truly find out what you're great at that separates you from everybody else, that's really when your career starts, at least in my opinion.
I love it. Erika?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think when Maxine talked about having the confidence to speak up, silence is endorsement. You have to have that confidence. And in order to have that confidence, you have to have competence, right? So, and you want them to be equally matched, right? You don't want your confidence to outstrip your competence and vice versa. And I say, if you can be 3 questions deep, right? If you've done the work, if you can sort of answer what the 3 smart questions are about that topic, then you should have the confidence to state your case and try to influence others to see your point of view. And you will have a unique point of view because of your diversity. And I think that's a wonderful thing, and that can be your secret weapon. That can be what distinguishes you from the rest. You will be remembered. Very often, I'm sure all of us, I know I have often been the only in the room. And you can use that as a source of insecurity, or you can use that as a source of power. I chose to use it as my secret source of power.
And in the first time out, you're not always able to persuade. We know our craft is persuasion, and sometimes you make an argument and you are prepared, and it may not happen the first time, but often it may happen the 10th time. And so M. Night Shyamalan, the connections are incredible, talked about failing and succeeding and failing and succeeding, and so it may not happen the first time out. And so that is helpful. That is helpful to all of us, not just our students.
Yeah, and you can influence without authority.
Absolutely.
And part of your influencing skills is knowing what people value in terms of the information they need to be swayed in terms of what their opinions may have been previously. So some people influence with data. There are ways to influence. So you have to understand what will land with that individual. in the financial services industry, data is key. And when you have your data and you have your facts, that can really help you move the needle in terms of bringing people closer to your thoughts.
I mean, just let me add,
Yeah,
on the other
please
hand,
do.
I do think institutions have a responsibility as well. So we've been talking about what the individuals can do. But if your institution does not create an environment in which the best ideas, wherever they come from, are going to be well received, in which they are open to hearing from everyone, in which there is psychological safety for people to take the risk to speak up, then that institution is not going to get the benefit of both the core competencies and the skills
innovation.
that come from being unique, different, having different perspective as well. So it is to create the right ecosystem for success, you're going to need both. So there are also people who run those systems.
Absolutely.
So the message is for the people in those systems too. If you want to get the benefit, if you want to be the best, if you want to be the company that outlasts the others and that gets a broader share of the market, you need to create that environment where the students, it may be, who are learning in this way, who are coming forward. We see, for instance, a lot of underrepresented people who have heard and had the experience over time that they are not to be listened to. That their voice or their opinion is not the most important one. And therefore, that translates for them into a habit of, I'm going to keep my head down, I'm just going to do this work.
Right.
So they're only focused on that, I'm going to deliver here at this core level. But then they never become the ones who are pushing the boundaries, who are causing us to do the things that are innovative. And for that to happen, yes, it's a confidence building by them, but also the institution has to be operating in such a way to leverage that value.
I love it. And this leads us to measuring. How do we measure? Then you don't get the benefit of the talent that you have. And I want to talk about how you measure, how you in fact measure success. You know, in addition to President Wingard's inauguration this week, we are also excited about, Amy mentioned, we received the HEAT Award. That's like the Oscars in higher ed for commitments to diversity. So it's like a big deal for us, right?
Congratulations.
And so, and so they measure, you know, how we engage students across sort of intersecting identities. They measure our community impact. And so we have pathways to Temple for young people who live in the zip code surrounding Temple, academic enrichment, scholarships, and so forth. We have a number of other efforts to mitigate the effects of racism, and so there is a rigorous and competitive application process. But we also listen to students, faculty, and staff. We want to know how they feel. What's this place like to live here, to work here, to learn here, and who works here, whether employed or doing business, and not just those clustered in the lowest paying jobs, but who works here, and we take a look at that. So for each of you, how do you measure success in your space?
Gosh, there's so many different ways depending on the part of the space. So let me just start by saying that we take an approach which looks at individual impact and systemic. So that we build to lift and improve systems by taking the insights from what is happening to individuals or groups. And that way you can leverage these insights to help everyone. So we may see, for instance, that Black-owned businesses are suffering like in an outsized way. And then we think, how can we assist there? How can we build to level that playing field a bit? So for instance, one of our initiatives, of which I'm very proud, is one where we buy back invoices that have not been settled, that are owned by minority-owned businesses. So we will buy that so that you have cash flow. Because cash flow alone can sink a business.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And then we'll take on the risk of getting it back from whoever you contracted with who hasn't been paying you. And we do that to the tune of millions and millions and millions so that these businesses can keep flourishing. That's a small thing that actually has a big impact. And it's different, right? It's not the first thing you'd think of for a company to do. Like, I didn't have that contract with you. Like, how do I even get involved? But you see the group that is being impacted and you build something to help there. Similarly, if we think about what happens with our talent, right? There are ways in which we've completely changed the way we do people analytics, because naturally it relies on large data sets. You say, okay, we see something significant happening here, and significance is about how many people are experiencing that. But we said, well then, if you did only that, you would never know what was happening with truly minority, like how many Native Americans do you have working there? If your numbers are so small, are we ever getting
Exactly.
the insight or the data? So we completely change in order to weigh more qualitative experiences. And then how do you know what the qualitative experiences are? We built something called the microphone report, where people can anonymously report microaggressions happening at the company. They don't rise to the level of policy violations that would go to legal, but there are things that are making this environment unfair and making it uninhabitable almost for people. And so if we can understand what those are, now we do training to address that, to help people know what are the micro behaviors that would be an allyship, that would be an improvement to that experience. And so all through the chain, you're looking, but using the data, qualitative and quantitative, to figure out where the areas are that you need input in order to build a much better ecosystem all around.
Love it, love it. Reggie, same question really. How do you measure success, and what are some of the things, I love your examples, Maxine, what are the things you're most proud of in terms of DEI strategies?
Yeah, no, I love what Maxine talked about, and there's a lot of things that we do that really echo some of her work as well. So just in the interest of time, because there's probably some similarities between the three of us, I'll talk about two specifically, and both of which I'm really proud of. Our strategy is focused around three things. You have close to 40,000 McDonald's worldwide, and close to 14,000 just here in the U.S. And one of the things that's really important to us is that we represent the communities that we serve, right? That's a key pillar of our strategy. The other one is how do we accelerate cultures of inclusion and belonging? And the third one, which is where I'm going to spend my time, is focus on dismantling barriers to opportunity, economic opportunity, which is a lot of what Maxine talked about. And we're doing that in two very, very specific ways. One, going back to representing the communities that we serve, the opportunity to become an owner-operator, a franchisee for McDonald's is an opportunity for generational wealth.
Yes.
And so if we have our operator community representing the communities that we serve match what we see in the census or exceed, to be quite honest, especially in marginalized communities, then that allows an opportunity for not just a person but a family to have generational wealth. And so last December we made a $250 million investment to think about what are the ways in which we can provide a safety net for those who may not have the liquid capital originally to be a registered applicant to be a franchisee, but we're going to kind of help dismantle some of those barriers to opportunity because they're good in every other way beyond that, right? And so we're really proud about the progress that we currently are making on that and that we will make in that space as well. And the second, and I'll do a quick shout out to Carmetria Burton, who's in the audience, that's on my team.
Awesome.
She leads what we call our business diversity efforts, which is really focused on what probably normally would be called supplier diversity. A couple years ago, we set a goal to get to 25% representation and spend from diverse communities by 2025. We reached that goal last year,
Awesome.
right? And the second key component of the work that we're doing around that is what we call a mutual commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, where we're taking our entire supplier community and said, hey, McDonald's is on this DEI journey. We want to make sure you're along with us. And so at this point, we have over 350 plus suppliers who have signed on to that. And we're all trying to move a needle now as a total McDonald's system around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we think that can have a ripple effect, not only from a corporation perspective, but just across the industry of QSR to really get big and bold around things that drive equity and inclusion across the country and hopefully around the world.
That's nice. Thank you. Erika.
They leave so little to be said.
Thanks for letting me go second.
I'll share a few of our key operating principles. One of the things that we really focus on is transparency. So we've been very transparent at Citi around pay equity measures. We've been very transparent around the diversity of our people, the diversity of our managing director class, which is the most senior title at our company. So we think by being transparent, even the reporting that we do is important because it holds us accountable in terms of the progress that we're making, the progress that we haven't made. So transparency is key for us, and we will always try to be very transparent so people can follow the journey that we're on. We do believe in metrics that which gets measured, get done.
Yes.
There are some that are more straightforward. If you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? That diversity, who's working at the company and at what levels, that does matter. And we have set aspirational representation goals to use goal setting as a tool to drive performance around where we think we should be vis-a-vis, to reflect the communities, the customers, and the clients that we serve. And that's not just in the US, but that's globally as well. So metrics are important to us. That which gets measured gets done. And then the last piece is that client engagement and the business engagement. So whether or not that's supplier diversity and other marketplace opportunities, we even connect with our clients and share best practice and co-sponsor events and things of that nature. But the other thing that we talk about engagement is senior leader engagement, right? And how we hold senior leaders accountable. So all of our senior leaders have scorecards. And there are diversity metrics, which aren't just in terms of representation, but also inclusive leadership. And we have an inclusion index that comes out of our VOE surveys and things of that nature. So, and that's part of their leadership competencies. And that does impact their performance and therefore their pay.
Absolutely.
So, everybody has a role to play when it comes to that level of engagement and the business engagement. And we do have businesses that focus on diversity, like our financial inclusion business in the consumer bank, like our MDI group that actually focuses on doing business with minority depository institutions, equity investments, et cetera. And finally, I'll say I'm most proud that we just hit a 2-year anniversary for our Action for Racial Equity platform. So it was a 3-year commitment. We've already exceeded that $2 billion commitment over 3 years that focuses on affordable housing, investing in minority-owned businesses, supplier diversity, and our efforts to be an anti-racist institution.
Thank you so much, Erika. We've decided to open this up to the audience for questions too. But Maxine, I want to ask you one final question before we open it up to the audience. So with all of the strategies and...
I thought you were going to say, how can I get a blue tick on my Instagram?
That is a question our president may be interested in. But no, with all of today's, the plans and strategies, what's missing that really could accelerate our progress even more? And then we'll open it up to the audience.
Do you mean our progress as a society?
For you all in the corporate space, we can talk about that, or we can talk about society. But what do you think is missing that we've missed that we could do to move the needle even further?
Boy, I think that it is a societal problem. That's the truth. And so if corporations are acting alone, you're only going to see so much progress. But acting with educational institutions, right? One of my big beefs is, why don't more people learn computer science, coding, in every country in the world? If we know that this is where jobs are, if we know that the benefits of technology, what they can build, like this is an innovation space, it's a growing space, why don't we teach that more? And the answer to that is there's so many different reasons why. But the point is we can develop, which we have greatly increasing number of internships that we do. And then we have internships where we're particularly focused on non-traditional students, on students from minority backgrounds. But like all of that, we could keep doing that. But if we're not working together,
I agree.
We're not going to see, when you talk about dramatic shifts, we'll see some shifts, we'll see some increases. But for it to be really dramatic, we need to work together. Private, public sector, all of us together, if we have this common goal for creating more opportunity.
I appreciate you guys. Help me thank our panel before we open it up to questions. Thank you so much.
Such good information. Do we have any questions from the audience for the panel? In the front. Yeah, let's do, green and then pink. That's all I can see.
There's a microphone in the middle here.
Yeah, they need it for the live stream.
Hi, yes. You all have positions within large corporations that have the capital and you have the power to affect change, like a trickle-down effect, where you can create large change. I'm a student within an institution, a participant within this institution. So I was just wondering if you have any suggestions on how I, on a minute level, without much power and without the resources of a large corporation or institution, can affect change within my institution, within my daily life. And I was wondering, what was your experience with that when you were younger?
I'll jump in first and maybe give a little pushback to say you do have power, just to start off with. What a lot of people don't maybe realize about the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion is that a lot of it is influence. A lot of the metrics that we talked about a little earlier of things that we need to move the needle within our corporations, we don't own. None of us own. None of the four of us own. So we have to get the business to do something and take ownership around that. And sometimes that's done because we take people's pay if they don't, and sometimes it's done just because we have to have the strength in our voices to showcase why that's important to the organization and why it's important to that growth. The good thing about influence is that anyone has an opportunity to do that. So at your level, at the local level, regardless of where you sit in this world, you can make a difference from the seat that you occupy. And I think that's a really important thing to do because most change happens from a grassroots level, right? I think to the point that Maxine made around corporations, in a lot of ways, we're working to step up and fill a need that other sectors within our economy are not, because there's been such a groundswell from this generation, the next upcoming generation, and even the current generation, that this is important, that I won't engage with a brand or a company that doesn't mirror my values. So I would say just start with what you can do here and how you can influence and make change here at Temple, but definitely you have a ton of power, and I'll leave it up for Maxine and Erika.
I would say a boy called Mark Zuckerberg at 19, who was a student at a college, thought of something that didn't exist and started building that. And we now know what it has become. That if you are constrained by where you are, by who you are, you limit yourself from taking the steps to start building and doing. Now, we could talk about the complexities of it, the fact about if you could build something, you have to get funding, you have to get support, do you have seed capital? All of those are issues. But it starts with you starting and you building and understanding your power and doing this thing that I described, looking around and saying, like, what do we need? What would I enjoy building? And how does that work? So whether it is somebody who is a writer or somebody who's a filmmaker, we have enough examples of them, right? Saying, I have a vision and I'm going to start this thing wherever I am. And we've seen that there is success. Now, we'd like there to be more success, more examples, and certainly more examples by people who don't look like the traditional ones who've been able to achieve success, but they are there. And once they're there, we know there's room for more. So you just start.
Good. Thank you. Do we have another question? Okay. I don't know. Help me. Okay.
I've just learned this sign language for I don't know.
Thank you all so much. This was tremendous. What advice do you have for those of us that are leading DEI journeys when it appears too slow? You feel it's too slow, your students and faculty may feel it's too slow, and then of course some other faculty and students feel it's too fast. So how do we pace our DEI journeys when you want to already understanding it's a journey, but it just doesn't seem like it's the right pace? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll kick off. There's no one right answer to that. I think in this space you have to meet people, institutions, parts of the world where they are and bring them along the journey. So, that's one thing that you have to really be able to assess. I think how you influence, how you set a strategy. I treat diversity, equity, inclusion like any other business strategy. So, and some people may buy in because of the data. Some people may really feel in their heart it's the right thing to do. Some people will just do it because the board of directors said it's important. People will come along for lots of different reasons, but you have to set the strategy for them to follow and figure out exactly what are the key milestones, right, that keeps us on track on this journey towards this, end state. I don't know that there's really an end state. It might be, a race without a finish line, but there has to be a vision set and key milestones to work towards it. You have to figure out what's effective. You have to figure out, you talked about, you used the word allies. You need a lot of allies along the way. No one team can do it. If just my team at Citi is working on diversity, equity, inclusion for the 200,000+ people at the firm, we're in trouble. So everybody, you have to make a situation where everybody feels like they have a role to play and they can follow the strategy and move things forward.
Okay. All right, next question.
I'll quickly add on something. If you think about inclusion as a competency, right? We talked about competence, a little earlier. What happens when you're trying to build a competency? You first have to understand it, you have to get it in your head, and then your behavior change, right? So if you're talking about a math problem, you got to understand the concept, and then how you do that problem will change, right? The difference when you're talking about inclusion is you have to get it in your head, you have to change behavior, but you also have to get it in your heart as well, right? And so the time it takes to change someone's heart around inclusion is not a microwave process. It's not a fast process. So I would say to any other DEI professionals in the audience, have a little patience with yourself. We're more talking about, water that creates a Grand Canyon than you are a lightning strike.
Great. Next question, please.
Hi, my name is Eliana Pinckney, and I'm also a Temple student. I'm really excited to be here, and I've learned a lot already from what you all had to say. Ade, who is the person who just talked, and I are the heads of a student DEI committee for the college that we're a part of. And I was wondering what specific strategies could you recommend that we could implement within our own level to help make change? I heard what you had said about the microaggression anonymous form. That's something that hopefully we're looking to implement, but did you have any other strategies or any other things that you think would help us at our level?
I would say it depends on what your objective is. So we'd have to understand, what are you trying to change, fix, improve? And then we determine what's the best strategy for doing that. So is there something in particular you're thinking about?
Yeah, both of us are musical theater majors, and the arts sector is traditionally, we do a lot of Eurocentric focused work, and we're working to help make sure that all artists, no matter their racial or gender, other backgrounds, feel included and represented in the work. So working on doing less of colorblind casting and working on changing the types of plays that we're reading in class and making sure that all of the historical context we're getting isn't just white and that it's representative of all the people in our program.
Yeah, I would say, what I heard about what you mentioned was more about having to change multiple systems. And I would say within that, you really have to think through, truthfully, what are you going to be able to accomplish during your time here, and what things do you do that set up for the next generation that's going to come behind you to start their work as well? Because there is no systemic thing that can be done in 4 years or 6 years, depending on your matriculation here at school. So I would say there is an opportunity to think about how to refine your focus. Right? That's something that we have to tackle every single day. There's a ton of things that we can do from a DEI perspective, but to move an organization as big as Citi, as big as Meta, as big as the entire Temple University thing, or McDonald's, we have to really say, these are the things that we're going to focus on. And so as you think about what you can truly accomplish during your time here, apply a level of priority and focus, and that is, I think, at least a start.
You know what? Thank you so much for your question. I get so proud when I hear you talking about this, because we're showing off how brilliant our students are, and it's really. But the thing is, Maxine said something very important about understanding the value of your voice, and so I think I don't know if Dr. Williams Witherspoon is here, but she would agree with us on this too. Part of our job is to help you to develop your skills in terms of persuasion and articulating positions so that you have the confidence to make those arguments. And that's the onus is on us to do that. And I will commit to you. So we'll connect. Dr. Archie is sitting here. And I don't know if Dr. Williams Witherspoon is here, but we will commit to you to be helpful to you in articulating arguments in a way that is persuasive so that you can see the kind of change that you're looking for. So thank you so much for your questions and for your courage in raising those questions.
Hello, my name is Leah Murphy. I'm actually an alumni of Temple University, and really wanted to first just give you guys a shout out for doing this immense project, right? A long time ago, I won't tell you how long ago. When I was here, this level of conversation was not happening. This stage would not have looked this way. So I am personally gratified as an alumni that my money went to the right things, and that now we're in a place where these students get the benefit of this stage and this moment, and this really can encapsulate their experience and their potential in future. So I wanted to just acknowledge that first. Secondly, I am a small business owner. I'm an entrepreneur, came out of Temple. I spent most of my career in corporate America, supply chain engineering, all of the things, right? So you guys, there's so many parallels, everybody's story. So the moment that I am in now is to really encourage students and executives as they're thinking about their careers as an executive coach, as well as someone who does talent development, to really think about calculated risk in this era. And I feel like a lot of times when we talk about the academic experience as well as the corporate experience, it is very protected, right? It's very insulated, and it's perceived as something that is a linear path. And what I'm learning now and what I'm coaching my clients on is calculated risk taking is super critical in career. So I would love to understand from each of you how you are incorporating that into your DE&I strategy, because big risks need to be taken in order to see big gains. So if you could answer that question, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. So the question is, how do we incorporate risk as we develop strategies?
How do we incorporate risk assessment as you develop strategies, as well as as you advise organizations like Temple to prepare students? How do you talk to them about incorporating calculated risk so that students have that level of resiliency?
That might be a question for you too.
So there was a lot of parts, and it made me think of a lot of things. You know, our president has elevated all of our efforts. You know, corporations in many aspects are ahead of us in terms of, you know, I'm so intrigued, and I can see that he's intrigued by the vendor payback programs. I mean, we're like, what? You know, and he will challenge us to the next level. You guys are ahead of us in terms of supplier diversity and vendor initiatives and that kind of thing. And so I think this has been an extraordinary opportunity for us to learn sort of best practices in a different space so that we can then work with our partners, small businesses like you in this area, with more sophisticated techniques to incorporate and make this journey more equitable and easier. In terms of teaching our students, I think it's the same thing. I think it's equipping them with the knowledge that leads to the kind of confidence so they can be advocates for themselves and business owners. And I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I know the president and I are stuck on this vendor supplier diversity piece, and we're like, whoa, we have to do that. And so as a small business, I'm just encouraged by your presence here, and I think that we're going to work toward really bumping our game up so that it is closer to what we're seeing in corporate America.
Thank you for the question.
I'll maybe add a couple things because I know. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go
Erika.
ahead, go ahead.
No, ladies first. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to offer one perspective, which is that there's always going to be a relationship between risk and reward, right? You know, as somebody who once was a capital markets professional, there's risk and reward, there's investment, and there's returns, right? And so that's how I think about people's careers. So when we're giving career advice, whether or not it's young people or at any stage of your career, if you want to get rewards, if you want to get to that next level, you have to take risks. Now, a calculated risk is knowing that you're qualified for that role or having a keen understanding of your strengths and weaknesses and where you will have to develop or how you prepare for that next role. Or even as somebody who leads talent for a firm, who do we take a risk on, right? Based on their past performance, based on how we've assessed their potential. So, you know, potential goes a long way too in terms of what risks people are prepared to take on to be successful. So I think when you think about that risk of reward, it might be investing in a minority-owned business. It might be starting a business that, you know, puts your own capital at risk. And there's lots of ways I see that playing out for some of the things that we spoke about today and other things that I know cities doing and that I'm sure their organizations are doing. But you always have to think about what those relationships are and what are the necessary inputs, right? Because risk just for risk's sake, right? And I heard you say calculated, but still, there are certain inputs that are required in order to get the outputs that are, you know, hopefully expected.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
You're fine.
Thank you all for being here. So muffled. My name is Jermaine Edwards. I'm with the College of Education and Human Development Alumni Association. My question was partially addressed. You say what gets measured gets done. When it comes to diversity, do you have goals or benchmarks towards getting a certain number of women in, or someone is LGBTQ or a specific ethnicity? Or is it something happens in the news, let's see if we have that, how do you set your goal to target or to achieve a better percentage of diversity at your organizations?
Yeah, so we absolutely use goals as one tool in the toolkit to drive a more diverse workforce at Citi. And, we did not wait for the George Floyd murder to set those goals around Black representation at our firm. We set goals in 2018. We achieved them at the end of last year. Next week, we will announce new goals. Our goal was actually to increase the number of goals, be more inclusive. We started with gender globally and Black in the US. Now we will do Black globally in key countries like Brazil, UK, Canada, and the US. We will also expand our goals to include the LGBTQ plus community, the Hispanic Latinx community. So we will use goals for certain populations in order to acknowledge the talent pools that we have internally, to look at the external talent pools available to us, to look at our communities and clients that we serve, and the goals that we will announce next week will be reflective of that, and we will set them to achieve by 2025.
I just want to add a little something, which is that we also have goals, and we set those goals again before the murder of George Floyd. There is a lot of discourse now about companies and other entities, waking up after that and now having a journey, which is good. But here's the thing about goals. Goals are just words on paper if you don't have a strategy to achieve them.
Yes.
And I do think that people tend to put a lot of emphasis on, do you have goals? Do you have goals? When anybody can make up some numbers and say, hey, I have a goal. That don't help you achieve it. So when you say it's one tool, I see it as a sort of a cherry on top, where you have to have the strategies, you have to be able to execute against them, you have to have the resources to do that. And so there is so much that goes into success beyond the goals. The goals I see as a way to sort of boost, to give you some sort of a sign of where you might go. But for instance, when we started this journey, 14% of the people in technical roles were women at the company. As one rough measure of market availability, you might say, well, 18% of people graduating from US colleges got degrees in computer science. So you should have at least 18%. And there were years people kept saying to me, what is your goal? What is your goal? And I would say, my goal is to have more. Right? I have 14, now my goal is to have more. That's my goal. I resisted putting 18 as my goal, which would have been the obvious thing. Now we are at almost 25.6% women in technical roles, and that 18 has not changed. So had I decided then, okay, my goal is going to be what it suggests, what the market seems to be able to do, I may have stopped there. So I think the goal has to be seen in the context. The real work is, what are you doing? What are you doing to get progress? What are the, you have to ruthlessly prioritize because you can't do everything. So maybe it's one of the 3 things you all are going to focus. It's like malaria. You can do a lot, but like clean water, right? I'm going to focus on this and see what I get from that. And so figuring out what in your institution makes the most sense based on what you're trying to achieve, what your resources are, what your appetite is, what your systems that already exist are, how can you build new ones? And then you put the goals on top of that as some sort of a guiding light, and it may incentivize some people within the organization to work a little harder to execute against the strategies, but you have to have those strategies in place.
Yeah, and view it as a floor, right? Not the ceiling, right? As a floor. You can always go above for sure. And the other thing is you want to encourage the right behavior, right? Because you don't want to set a goal that has people doing the wrong things to achieve the goal, and typically then that's also not sustainable. So you want to make sure you have that strategy so it becomes systemic and sustainable over a period of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Can we thank our wonderful panel today? Absolutely fantastic information. Before we leave, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. to 12:30 at the Leah Core Center is Dr. Wingard's investiture. He will be formally welcomed as the 12th president of Temple University. It is free. There are no tickets. Please show up. It's going to be a great day. Tomorrow evening from 7 to 10, the celebrating continues at the Metropolitan Opera House for the Cherry and White Access Gala. And then, but wait, there's more. Homecoming is Saturday. 10:30 to 2 will be at the Link for the Homecoming tailgate and TU Philly Fest, and that's a free thing, and it's lots of fun to be there too. I want to thank you all for an amazing day and afternoon, and I'm kind of glad Luanna's with her grandbaby because I had a wonderful time. Thank you so much. Be safe going home.